In the heart of the Nevada desert, a small town called Dusty Flats was home to one of the most challenging motorcycle races in the world, the Iron Canyon 500. This annual event was a grueling 500-mile race through scorching heat, rugged terrain, and treacherous cliffs. It was a race that demanded not only speed, but also endurance, courage, and an unbreakable will. Among the racers was Jake the Hawk Harrison, a local legend known for his speed and fearlessness on the track. Jake had been racing motorcycles since he was a teenager, and by the time he was in his mid-20s, he was already a three-time champion of the Iron Canyon 500. But for Jake, racing wasn't just about winning trophies. It was his life, his passion, and his way of dealing with the ghosts of his past. Years ago, Jake had been involved in a terrible accident during a race. He had been pushing his limits, trying to break a personal speed record when he lost control of his bike on a sharp turn. The crash was devastating. Jake survived, but his best friend, Mark, who had been racing alongside him, wasn't so lucky. Mark died instantly, and Jake was left with a shattered leg, a broken spirit, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. Jake spent months in the hospital, recovering from his injuries, both physical and emotional. The guilt of losing Mark weighed heavily on him, and for a long time, he couldn't even look at his bike without feeling sick. He considered giving up racing altogether, but deep down, he knew that racing was the only thing that made him feel alive. It was the only way he knew how to honor Mark's memory. So, after a long and painful recovery, Jake returned to the track. But he wasn't the same racer he had been before the accident. He was haunted by the memory of Mark's death, and every time he got on his bike, he was plagued by doubt and fear. He won a few races, but his heart wasn't in it. He was just going through the motions, trying to outrun his demons. It wasn't until the following year's Iron Canyon 500 that Jake finally began to confront his fears. The race was notorious for its difficulty, and it attracted some of the best racers from around the world. Jake knew that if he was going to reclaim his title and find redemption, he would have to face the course that had nearly claimed his life. The day of the race arrived, and the atmosphere in Dusty Flats was electric. Thousands of fans lined the streets, cheering on their favorite racers as they prepared for the grueling journey ahead. Jake stood by his bike, a sleek, black machine that had been customized to handle the rough terrain of the canyon. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that had been gnawing at him all morning. As he looked around at the other racers, he noticed a new face in the crowd, a young rider named Lucas Lightning Rodriguez. Lucas was a rising star in the racing world, known for his incredible speed and daring maneuvers. He had already won several major races that year, and many believed he was the only one who could challenge Jake for the title. Lucas approached Jake with a confident grin. "So, you're the famous Hawk," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Jake shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "And you must be Lightning," he replied. "I've seen your races. You've got some serious skills." Lucas nodded, his eyes glinting with determination. "I plan to win this race, Jake, but it's an honor to go up against a legend like you." Jake smiled, though there was a sadness in his eyes. "Just remember, this race isn't like the others. It'll test you in ways you can't imagine." The starting signal blared, and the racers revved their engines, ready to tear through the desert. As the race began, Jake's instincts took over. He surged forward, the roar of his engine drowning out everything else. The wind whipped against his face as he leaned into the first turn, his heart pounding with adrenaline. The race was as brutal as Jake had anticipated. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the heat rose off the asphalt in shimmering waves. The terrain was unforgiving, with sharp rocks, deep ruts, and narrow passages that required absolute precision. One wrong move could send a rider crashing into the canyon walls or tumbling down the cliffs. Despite the challenges, Jake found himself in the lead for much of the race. He navigated the twists and turns with practiced ease, his mind and body working in perfect harmony. But as he approached the halfway point, his thoughts began to drift back to the accident. He could see Mark's face, hear his laughter, and feel the weight of his loss. Suddenly, his focus wavered, and he misjudged a turn, His bike skidded on the loose gravel, and for a terrifying moment, he thought he was going to crash. But somehow, he managed to regain control, narrowly avoiding disaster. The close call rattled him, and he knew he couldn't afford to lose concentration again. As he continued to race, he noticed Lucas gaining on him. The young rider was fast, too fast. He was taking risks that Jake wouldn't dare, pushing his bike to the limit. It was clear that Lucas was determined to win, no matter the cost. But Jake knew that this race was about more than just speed. It was about endurance, strategy, and the ability to keep a cool head under pressure. With the finish line still miles away, the race entered the most dangerous part of the course, Dead Man's Pass. This treacherous section of the canyon was infamous for its narrow, winding roads and sheer drop-offs. Many racers had met their end here, and even the most experienced riders approached it with caution. Jake's heart raced as he entered the pass. The road was barely wide enough for his bike, and one wrong move would send him plummeting into the abyss below. He could hear the roar of the other racers behind him, but he forced himself to stay focused, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. As he rounded a particularly sharp bend, he saw Lucas up ahead. The young racer had taken the lead, but he was riding recklessly, cutting corners and skimming dangerously close to the edge. Jake could see the determination in Lucas's every move, but he could also see the inexperience, the arrogance of youth. Suddenly, Lucas hit a patch of loose gravel, and his bike swerved wildly. He tried to correct it, but it was too late. The bike skidded out of control, and Lucas was thrown off, tumbling towards the edge of the cliff. Jake's instincts kicked in, and without thinking, he slammed on his brakes, jumping off his bike and racing towards Lucas. He reached the young rider just in time, grabbing him by the arm as he dangled precariously over the edge. Lucas's eyes were wide with fear, his bravado gone. "Don't let go," he pleaded, his voice trembling. Jake gritted his teeth, using every ounce of strength to pull Lucas back to safety. The two men collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily as they stared at the sheer drop below. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. Finally, Lucas looked up at Jake, his expression one of gratitude and disbelief. "Why did you do that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "You could have won the race. You could have let me fall." Jake shook his head, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "It's not about winning, Lucas. It's about living to race another day. I lost a friend once because I was too focused on winning. I'm not going to make that mistake again." Lucas nodded slowly, the weight of Jake's words sinking in. He realized that he had been so consumed with proving himself that he had lost sight of what really mattered. Racing was about more than just speed and glory. It was about respect, honor, and the bond between those who shared the same passion. The two men helped each other back to their bikes, their rivalry replaced by a newfound camaraderie. They finished the race side by side, neither caring about who crossed the finish line first. The crowd erupted in cheers as they approached, recognizing the true victory that had been won that day. When the race was over, Jake stood on the podium, holding his trophy high. But this time, the victory felt different. It wasn't just about the trophy or the accolades. It was about the journey, the lessons learned, and the lives touched along the way. As he looked out at the crowd, he saw Lucas standing below, watching him with a look of admiration and respect. Jake knew that he had made a difference, not just for himself, but for the next generation of racers who would carry the torch forward. In the years that followed, Jake continued to race, but he also became a mentor to young riders like Lucas. He taught them not just how to be fast, but how to be wise, how to respect the road and each other, and how to find balance between ambition and caution. Jake's story became a legend in the racing world, a tale of redemption, of a man who had faced his demons and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. And as long as there were races to be run and roads to be conquered, the spirit of the hawk would live on, inspiring others to chase their dreams with courage, integrity, and an unyielding love for the ride. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.